Imagine you're standing inside the Temple of Karnak in Egypt. The chamber is dark, cool. The massive stone walls rise around you, limestone blocks fitted so precisely you can't slide a blade between them. You're alone in a small room called the Chapel of Osiris. The ceiling is low, maybe 8 feet high. The dimensions feel deliberate, purposeful. You take a breath and begin to chant. A low tone, humming. Your voice reverberates off the stone, and something strange happens. The room begins to resonate. Your voice doesn't just echo, it amplifies. The sound builds. The walls seem to vibrate. You feel it in your chest, in your bones. The frequency locks at a specific pitch. You can feel it stabilizing, harmonizing. You don't know it yet, but the room is resonating at 110 Hertz. And that frequency is doing something to your brain. Modern neuroscientists discovered this in 2008. They brought fMRI scanners and EEG machines into temples like this. They measured brain activity while people were exposed to 110 Hertz frequencies. What they found was shocking. 110 Hertz deactivates the language center of your brain. It shuts down the left prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for analytical thinking, language processing, rational thought. And it activates the right hemisphere, the emotional, creative, pattern recognition center. In other words, this specific frequency measurably alters human consciousness. It induces a trance-like state. It shifts you from logical thinking to emotional experience. And here's what makes this impossible. Ancient Egyptians designed their temple chambers to resonate at this exact frequency. Not 105 Hertz, not 115 Hertz, exactly 110 to 111 Hertz. The room dimensions, the ceiling height, the wall thickness, the stone selection, all engineered for acoustic resonance at the precise frequency that alters brain function. They built neuroscience into their architecture 3,000 years before we discovered brainwaves existed. Scientists can't explain how they knew. Welcome to one of the strangest mysteries in Egyptology. Because this isn't one temple, it's not one chamber. It's a pattern that appears across multiple Egyptian temples, across different dynasties, spanning thousands of years. And it's not just Egypt. The same 110 Hertz resonance shows up in ancient temples around the world. Malta, Ireland, Peru, Turkey. As if ancient builders globally understood something about sound and consciousness that we're only now rediscovering. Let's examine the evidence. Chapter 1. The 2008 Discovery. The story begins in 2008 with a researcher named Dr. Ian Cook at UCLA. Cook wasn't an archaeologist. He was a neuroscientist studying how different frequencies affect brain activity. He was using EEG, electroencephalography, to measure brainwaves while exposing subjects to various sound frequencies. And he noticed something curious. When subjects were exposed to 110 Hertz, their brain activity shifted dramatically. The left prefrontal cortex, responsible for language, logic, and analytical thinking, showed reduced activity. The right hemisphere, responsible for emotion, creativity, and spatial awareness, showed increased activity. This wasn't subtle. This was a measurable, consistent pattern across multiple subjects. 110 Hertz was acting like a switch, shifting the brain from analytical mode to experiential mode. Cook published his findings, and that's when archaeologists started paying attention. Because 110 Hertz wasn't a random frequency, it kept appearing in measurements of ancient structures. In 2014, a team of researchers traveled to the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum in Malta, a massive underground temple complex carved from solid limestone around 3600 BC. They brought acoustic measurement equipment. They tested the resonant frequencies of various chambers. The main oracle chamber resonated at 110 Hertz. Not approximately, exactly. The room dimensions, the ceiling height, the stone composition, everything was designed to amplify this specific frequency. Then they tested other ancient sites. Newgrange, Ireland, 3200 BC. Main chamber resonates at 110 Hertz. Chavin de Huanta, Peru, 1200 BC. Underground galleries resonate at 110 Hertz. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, 9600 BC. Enclosures show acoustic properties tuned to similar frequencies. Multiple temples, multiple chambers, same frequency. Karnak Temple, Chapel of Osiris, 110 Hertz. Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Specific chambers at 110 to 111 Hertz. The Osireion at Abydos. Underground chambers at 110 Hertz. This wasn't coincidence. This was intentional acoustic engineering, appearing globally across cultures that supposedly had no contact. And they all chose the same frequency, the one that modern neuroscience confirmed alters consciousness. What 110 Hertz does to your brain. Let's get specific about what happens when your brain is exposed to 110 Hertz. The human brain operates on electrical signals. Neurons firing create measurable electrical patterns called brainwaves. These waves have different frequencies. Delta, 0.5 to 4 Hertz, deep sleep. Theta, 4 to 8 Hertz, meditation, deep relaxation, REM, sleep. Alpha, 8 to 13 Hertz, relaxed awareness, light meditation. Beta, 13 to 30 Hertz, active thinking, problem solving, anxiety. Gamma, 30 plus Hertz, peak concentration, heightened perception. When you're awake and thinking normally, your brain is primarily in beta state, analytical, language-based, logical. But 110 Hertz does something different. It doesn't directly change your brainwave frequency. Instead, it affects which parts of your brain are active. Dr. Cook's research showed reduced activity in the left prefrontal cortex. This is your language center, your analytical thinking, your sense of time, your inner narrator, the voice in your head that constantly talks. Increased activity in the right hemisphere, emotional processing, pattern recognition, spatial awareness, holistic thinking, timelessness, loss of time perception, connection to something larger. In other words, 110 Hertz temporarily shuts down your logical mind and opens your emotional/experiential mind. Difficulty forming words or speaking. Loss of time perception. 10 minutes feels like 1 minute or 1 hour. Heightened emotional states. Feeling of connection or oneness. Visual imagery, even with eyes closed. Deep relaxation or trance states. This is exactly what you'd want for a religious or mystical experience. Ancient priests conducting rituals wanted participants to stop thinking analytically, stop questioning, experience emotions deeply, feel connection to the divine, lose track of time, enter altered states. And 110 Hertz creates all of that measurably. Now here's the disturbing part. This isn't a minor effect. This is a neurological response that happens consistently across all humans. It's not cultural, it's not learned, it's biological. 110 Hertz affects human brains the same way regardless of language, culture, or belief system. It's a frequency exploit, a hack for human consciousness that works on everyone. And ancient Egyptians built it into their temples. The question is, how did they know? Chapter 3. The Egyptian Evidence. Let's look at specific Egyptian temples and how they were designed for acoustic resonance. Temple of Karnak, Chapel of Osiris. This chamber is small, roughly 12 feet by 12 feet, with an 8-foot ceiling. It's built from limestone blocks. The walls are smooth, precisely fitted. When you make sound in this room, it resonates strongly. Acoustic engineers measured it. Dominant resonant frequency of 110 Hertz. The dimensions aren't random. This is a calculated resonance chamber, like a musical instrument tuned to a specific note. The ceiling height, wall spacing, and stone density all contribute to creating a standing wave at 110 Hertz. But here's what makes it deliberate. The room amplifies this frequency. If you hum at 110 Hertz, the room makes it louder. If you hum at 90 Hertz or 130 Hertz, the room dampens it. It's acoustically selective. It wants 110 Hertz. This requires understanding of acoustic wavelengths, standing wave formation, material properties, stone density affects sound, geometry and resonance, none of which ancient Egyptians supposedly possessed. Temple of Hathor at Dendera. The same temple, famous for the light bulb hieroglyphs, also has acoustic properties. Certain chambers, particularly the underground crypts, show enhanced resonance at 110 to 112 Hertz. The crypts are carved from bedrock. The dimensions vary, but multiple chambers hit the same frequency range. Priests conducting rituals in these crypts would experience the consciousness-altering effects of the resonance. The Osireion at Abydos. This is one of the strangest structures in Egypt, a massive underground temple made of megalithic granite and sandstone blocks. It's buried 50 feet underground, possibly built and later buried, or the water table rose. The architecture is unusual, different from typical Egyptian temples. Massive blocks, minimal decoration. And the acoustic properties are extraordinary. The underground chambers create natural reverb, sound echoes and sustains. But more than that, the dominant resonant frequency in the main chamber measures at 110 Hertz. The chamber dimensions, the granite's density, the underground acoustics, all combine to amplify this specific frequency. Pattern across multiple temples. What's remarkable is that this isn't isolated to one or two sites. Multiple Egyptian temples show evidence of acoustic design. Karnak, Chapel of Osiris, various chambers. Dendera, underground crypts. Abydos, Osireion. Luxor Temple, certain inner chambers. Temple of Isis at Philae, specific rooms. Different dynasties, different time periods, different locations. But the same acoustic frequency, 110 Hertz. This suggests knowledge was transmitted across time. Later builders knew what earlier builders knew. There was a deliberate purpose. This wasn't aesthetic, it was functional. Acoustic engineering was part of temple design. Not an accident, a requirement. The temples weren't just buildings. They were acoustic instruments designed to alter the consciousness of people inside them. Chapter 4. The Stone Selection Mystery. Here's something archaeologists often overlook. The Egyptians didn't just design room dimensions for acoustics. They selected specific types of stone based on acoustic properties. Different stones have different acoustic characteristics. Limestone. Dense, fine-grained. Excellent for reflecting sound. Creates strong reverb. Used in chambers designed for resonance. Granite. Very dense, crystalline structure. Dampens some frequencies, amplifies others. Used in chambers requiring different acoustic properties. Has piezoelectric properties, generates electricity under pressure. Sandstone. More porous than limestone. Absorbs sound, reduces echo. Used in chambers where dampening was desired. The Egyptians used different stones in different parts of the same temple. In acoustic chambers like the Chapel of Osiris, they used limestone exclusively. Why? Because limestone at specific thickness and density creates the strongest resonance at 110 Hertz. They could have used granite. They could have used sandstone. Both were available. But they chose limestone for acoustic chambers. This implies they understood the relationship between material properties and sound. They knew limestone would resonate. Granite would dampen, sandstone would absorb. How? Trial and error over centuries? Maybe. But that requires recognizing that different stones sound different, measuring or perceiving specific frequencies, understanding that certain frequencies have specific effects, intentionally designing for those effects. That's not simple observation, that's acoustic science. Chapter 5, the global pattern. Now let's zoom out, because Egypt isn't alone. The 110 Hertz resonance appears in ancient structures around the world. Halsaflieni, Hypogeum, Malta, 3600 BC. This is one of the most remarkable examples. An entirely underground temple complex carved from solid limestone. 3 levels, multiple chambers. The oracle chamber, a small room with a curved ceiling, resonates at exactly 110 Hertz. When you speak in this chamber, your voice resonates so strongly it's felt physically. The vibration moves through your body. Modern visitors report feeling vibrations in their bone, dizziness or disorientation. Emotional responses, some people cry. Time distortion. Difficulty speaking clearly. These are the same effects Dr. Cook documented with 110 Hertz in controlled laboratory settings. The chamber was clearly designed for this. The curved ceiling, the dimensions, the stone selection. And here's the mysterious part. Malta and Egypt are 1,500 miles apart. Same frequency, same acoustic engineering, same time period. Malta's hypogeum is roughly contemporary with early Egyptian temples. Coincidence? Or shared knowledge? Newgrange, Ireland, 3,200 BC. A massive stone passage tomb in Ireland, built before Stonehenge, before the pyramids. The inner chamber, a corbelled stone room, resonates at 110 Hertz. The chamber dimensions create this frequency naturally. The stone selection amplifies it. Modern acoustic engineers who've studied Newgrange say the acoustic properties are too precise to be accidental. The chamber was designed to resonate. An island is 2,500 miles from Egypt, 4,000 miles from Malta. Same frequency. Chavín de Huántar, Peru, an ancient temple complex in the Peruvian Andes. Underground galleries carved into rock, narrow passages, stone chambers. Acoustic analysis shows dominant resonance at 110 Hertz in several galleries. But there's more. The site has hydraulic systems built into the underground channels. Water flowing through stone channels creates a rumbling sound that resonates at 110 Hertz. The temple was designed so that during rainy season, the flowing water would create the exact frequency needed to alter consciousness. Peru is 6,000 miles from Egypt, 8,000 miles from Malta. Same frequency. We have ancient temple sites on 4 different continents, built by cultures separated by thousands of miles, and in some cases, thousands of years. No evidence of contact, no shared language, no known communication. Yet they all engineered acoustic resonance at 110 Hertz. Either this is an extraordinary coincidence. Multiple cultures independently discovered the same frequency by accident. Human brains naturally respond to 110 Hertz, and ancient cultures discovered this independently. Possible, but requires explaining how they measured frequency without instruments. There was shared knowledge from a common source. Implies a much older tradition of acoustic science that spread globally. None of these explanations are comfortable. How did they measure frequency? Here's the central problem. How did ancient Egyptians measure 110 Hertz? We can measure it today with acoustic analysis software, frequency meters, oscilloscopes, spectrum analyzers, none of which existed in 2500 BC. So how did they know they'd hit 110 Hertz specifically? Theory 1. They felt it. Human bodies can feel vibrations. We perceive frequencies physically, especially in enclosed spaces. Maybe Egyptian priests experimented with different room dimensions and noticed that certain configurations created a specific physical sensation. Over time, they could have standardized the dimensions that produce the desired effect. Problem: this requires incredible sensitivity and consistency. Distinguishing 110 Hz from 105 Hz or 115 Hz by feel alone is extraordinarily difficult. Theory 2. They used musical instruments. Ancient Egyptians had flutes, drums, lyres, and other instruments. Maybe they tuned room dimensions to match specific musical notes. 110 Hz is close to the musical note A, which is typically 110 Hz in some tuning systems. They could have built chambers that resonated with specific instrument tones. Problem: this still requires them to discover that this particular frequency affects consciousness. Why choose 110 Hz and not 80 Hz or 140 Hz? Theory 3. Trial and error over centuries. Maybe generations of temple builders experimented. Some chambers worked for inducing trance states, others didn't. Over time, they refined the dimensions to maximize the effect. Problem: this implies they recognized that acoustic properties were causing the consciousness effects. That's a sophisticated understanding of cause and effect that requires systematic observation. Theory 4. They inherited the knowledge. Maybe the acoustic science came from an earlier tradition, one that had developed this understanding through long observation or experimentation. Later Egyptian builders inherited standardized dimensions without fully understanding why they worked. Problem: this pushes the question back in time. Where did the original knowledge come from? Theory 5. They discovered it accidentally and recognized the pattern. Maybe a naturally resonant cave or chamber was discovered. People experienced altered states inside. Someone recognized that the physical space was causing the effect. Then they reverse engineered the dimensions and replicated it in built structures. Problem: this still requires advanced understanding to go from "this cave feels different" to "I can calculate dimensions that reproduce this effect." None of these explanations fully solve the mystery. What we're left with is evidence of acoustic engineering that required knowledge of frequency and wavelength, material properties and sound, standing waves and resonance, neurological effects of specific frequencies, all applied practically in architecture 3,000 years before we supposedly understood these principles. Chapter 7. The ritual purpose. Let's talk about why this matters. What were the Egyptians trying to achieve? Religious experience. Ancient Egyptian religion was experiential. It wasn't about belief or faith in the abstract. It was about direct experience of the divine. Temples weren't churches where you sat and listened to sermons. They were places where you experienced something: transformation, connection, altered states. The acoustic properties supported this. Imagine you're an initiate undergoing a ritual in the Chapel of Osiris. You enter a small, dark chamber. Priests begin chanting. The room resonates at 110 Hz. Your analytical mind shuts down. You lose track of time. You feel emotions intensely. You experience visions, connections, profound states. This is exactly what the acoustic engineering creates. It's not magic, it's applied neuroscience. The Egyptians used sound to facilitate religious experiences in the same way that modern meditation uses binaural beats. Shamanic cultures use drumming, often 4 to 7 Hz, theta-inducing. Churches use organ music, creates emotional resonance. But the Egyptians were more precise. They didn't just use any sound, they used a specific frequency known to affect consciousness. And they built that frequency into the architecture permanently. Mystery initiations. Some chambers in Egyptian temples were restricted. Not everyone could enter. Initiations into mystery schools likely took place in these acoustic chambers. The altered states induced by 110 Hz would make initiates more suggestible, more open to profound experiences, more likely to have transformative encounters. This is similar to Eleusinian mysteries in Greece, used kykeon, a psychoactive drink, plus sensory manipulation. Mithraic rituals in Rome, underground temples, altered states. Shamanic initiations worldwide, isolation, drumming, fasting. The Egyptians used acoustic manipulation as their technology for inducing altered states. Healing and therapy. There's evidence that certain temples functioned as healing centers. The Temple of Hathor at Dendera, for instance, was associated with healing. Modern sound therapy uses specific frequencies for healing. 528 Hertz, DNA repair, disputed but popular. 432 Hertz, relaxation, harmony. Binaural beats, various frequencies for different effects. 110 Hertz, specifically, has been studied for therapeutic effects. Reduces anxiety, alleviates depression symptoms, induces meditative states, promotes emotional release. Ancient Egyptians may have used their acoustic chambers for similar purposes. Patients would enter, sound would resonate. They'd experience altered states that facilitated healing. We're only now rediscovering what they knew. Chapter 8. Modern Rediscovery and Applications. The knowledge of acoustic properties in ancient structures was largely forgotten, until recently. In the last 20 years, researchers have started systematically measuring the acoustic properties of ancient sites, and they're finding that many were designed with sophisticated acoustic engineering. Modern research. Dr. Robert Jahn, Princeton, studied acoustic resonance in ancient chambers. Dr. Paul Devereaux researched archaeoacoustics globally. Dr. Ian Cook, UCLA, documented neurological effects of 110 Hertz. Various universities now have archaeoacoustics programs. What they're discovering. Ancient builders understood acoustics far better than previously thought. Specific frequencies were intentionally engineered into sacred spaces. These frequencies have measurable effects on human consciousness. The knowledge appears globally across unconnected cultures. Modern applications. Some researchers and therapists are using 110 Hertz for sound healing. Meditation spaces designed with 110 Hertz resonance. Therapeutic sessions using 110 Hertz tones. Binaural beat compositions incorporating 110 Hertz. Architecture. Concert halls using acoustic principles similar to ancient temples. Meditation centers designed for specific resonant frequencies. Modern sound temples built with acoustic engineering. Neuroscience. Studying how specific frequencies affect consciousness. Exploring therapeutic applications for anxiety, PTSD, depression. Understanding consciousness alteration through sound. We're essentially reverse engineering ancient acoustic technology and finding that it works. Chapter 9. The knowledge problem. Let's return to the central mystery. How did they know? We've established Egyptian temples have chambers that resonate at 110 Hertz. This frequency measurably alters brain activity. The acoustic design was intentional. Stone selection, dimensions, geometry. Similar patterns appear globally in ancient structures. We can replicate the effects with modern technology, but we haven't answered, how did ancient Egyptians discover this without modern instruments? Possible answers. Pyramids, empirical observation over millennia. Maybe the knowledge developed gradually. Generation 1. This cave makes people feel strange. Generation 50. Rooms of certain size create this effect. Generation 100. We can intentionally build rooms that cause this. Generation 200. Here are the standard dimensions that work. Over thousands of years, empirical observation could have led to standardized dimensions. 2. Inherited from earlier civilization. Maybe the acoustic knowledge came from pre-dynastic Egypt or an even earlier source. Egyptian civilization begins around 3100 BC officially, but the acoustic chambers at Abydos and elsewhere might be older. If there was an earlier period of advanced knowledge, later Egyptians could have inherited the architectural standards without fully understanding the science. 3. Different scientific framework. Maybe ancient Egyptians understood sound and consciousness through a completely different framework than our modern physics and neuroscience. They might have had empirical knowledge that worked, even though their theoretical explanations were different from ours. Similar to how ancient metallurgists created bronze without understanding atomic structure, they had empirical recipes that worked. 4. Systematic experimentation. Maybe mystery schools or priestly colleges conducted systematic experiments, building test chambers of different dimensions, observing effects on consciousness, refining designs based on results, recording successful configuration. This would require institutional knowledge preservation across generations. 5. Natural discovery plus recognition. Maybe someone discovered a naturally resonant space, cave, rock formation, where people experienced altered states. Someone recognized that the physical space was causing it. Then architects figured out how to replicate those dimensions artificially. This requires acute observation, understanding of cause and effect, ability to measure and reproduce dimensions accurately. None of these fully explains the precision. 110 Hertz specifically. Not 100 Hertz, not 120 Hertz. Across multiple temples, multiple sites, multiple time periods. Globally. That level of consistency suggests either A. Shared source of knowledge, global transmission. B. Independent discovery of the same optimal frequency, multiple cultures finding the same answer. C. Human neurology naturally gravitates toward 110 Hertz experientially. This frequency just works for consciousness alteration, and people figured it out independently. All three options have problems, which is why this remains one of archaeology's most intriguing mysteries. Conclusion: the sound of the sacred. So where does this leave us? We have clear evidence. Ancient Egyptian temples were designed with acoustic properties. Multiple chambers resonate at 110 Hertz. His frequency measurably alters human brain activity. The effect is consistent and neurologically verified. Similar acoustic engineering appears globally in ancient sacred sites. Modern replication confirms the effects. What we don't have: clear explanation of how ancient Egyptians measured frequency. Written records describing acoustic engineering principles. Understanding of how the knowledge spread globally. Definitive answer to whether this was scientific or empirical. What this tells us: ancient Egyptians weren't primitive. They understood something profound about sound, space, and consciousness, whether through centuries of observation, inherited knowledge from earlier sources, systematic experimentation, natural discovery and replication. They achieved what we're only now rediscovering: the use of specific frequencies to alter human consciousness in precise, measurable ways. Their temples weren't just buildings, they were instruments, designed to tune human consciousness the way you'd tune a musical instrument. 110 Hertz was their frequency of choice, not for music, for transformation. The next time you hear about ancient Egyptian temples, remember, they weren't just carved stone and painted walls. They were acoustic environments carefully engineered to affect everyone who entered. The priests chanting weren't just performing ritual. They were activating the architecture, using voice to resonate the chamber at frequencies that would alter the consciousness of everyone present. The temples were tools, the sound was the key. And 110 Hertz was the frequency that unlocked something in the human brain. We can measure it now. We can replicate it. We can verify it works. What we can't explain is how they knew 3,000 years ago. That knowledge, encoded in limestone chambers, in carefully calculated dimensions, in the stone itself, remains one of Egypt's most profound mysteries. Not hidden in hieroglyphs, not buried in tombs, hidden in sound.